Well, it's happened again. Another shooter in the Starcraft universe has been cancelled. So, what does this mean for things at Blizzard? How is it going to impact other projects? What's the future outlook like for their slate of games? There's a lot to talk about, all that and more in today's report. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another industry report. This is another utterly wild day. Be sure to check out our other reports on Stadia and Bungie's post-Activision future. So, last night, Kotaku's Jason Schreier released a report stating that Blizzard have cancelled a shooter set in the Starcraft universe. Now, not that Jason needs backed up, but I can confirm this story through my own sources. I've kind of known a bit about this for a few months at this stage, and I've heard a little bit about how this project has also impacted the state of Overwatch and its sequel. Now, Schreier spoke to three sources familiar with the matter. They told him that the StarCraft shooter was called Ares, that was its project name, and that it has been in development for the last 2 years. Now, this perfectly lines up with what I have heard. So, I was told that Blizzard's other shooter project took away resources from Overwatch, that it partially contributed to the slow-ish development pace of Overwatch, and that it also slowed down the development of Overwatch 2. Now, Jason's sources tell him, as mine did, that Overwatch 2 is a Pve game, so something very different to the current PvP game of Overwatch, likely, of course, building off the brand recognition and the story teases that Blizzard have been, weaving through for the last few years, and of course, it would be a game in addition to Overwatch, not one that would replace it. There is a little bit more that I can say here, but I think it'll be a little bit too revealing, even though there's a decent chance that I ended up talking to the same people that Jason did. Really, though, all I can sort of do here is say, I've heard the same stuff that he has. That's, I think Jason's report is basically completely on the money, and I've kind of heard about this for months. Now, this all does make sense to anyone who's actually been paying attention to Overwatch. Development for that game has been very slow, with the skins being kind of farmed out to contract art houses in cheaper countries. That's not to diss the work in those skins. Actually, Overwatch's skins are really quite gorgeous. That's at least what I've heard about the development stuff there. Now, from what I understood, resources were somewhat split between Ares and Overwatch 2, which again kind of lines up with what Jason has reported. And then something that lends credence to the resource problem is that recently a Blizzard animator who has left the company called David Gibson posted on Twitter that it was his last day at Blizzard, and that he said it was unfortunate that we'll never see what he had been working on for the last 2 years, but that he'll always have Overwatch, and then he linked his Overwatch showreel, so I think it's pretty darn clear. Now, why did all of this stuff happen? Well, we get a pretty darn clear picture from Jason's report. Blizzard, of course, built a brand new engine from scratch for Overwatch. Now, an engine is not just a one-shot asset for a single game, it's a selection of tools that are reusable. For an example, my own studio, we have begun, building common tech that we'll be working on, or that we're using for our current game, but is very, very much designed to be usable on our other projects and to speed them up, and in the process, saving us a whole bunch of time, and that means a whole bunch of money. It's the smart thing to do, and, it's just like that for Blizzard, but at a massive scale where you're dealing with millions and millions and millions of dollars. So, the Overwatch engine, that was developed by Blizzard with the intent to use it for future projects, seemingly including Overwatch 2 and the new StarCraft shooter. Now, this shooter was supposedly headed up by Dustin Browder, the director of StarCraft 2, who then went on to lead the now rather gutted Heroes of the Storm. According to Jason, this project was supposed to be essentially just the next game in the StarCraft universe, keeping that universe sort of ticking forward, pushing it forward, something I'll get into later. Now, he reports that the project's cancellation actually came at a great surprise to its team. Now, it's kind of interesting. I heard from a source that the project was really quite cool and quite promising. Jason's sources have a more mixed take. One said the development was slow, and then, of course, the other said that it came as a massive shock to the team, so clearly the team were feeling pretty confident about it. Now, Kotaku said that nobody was laid off as a result of this, so that Blizzard animator who I mentioned earlier in this video, he probably just changed jobs in light of his project being cancelled, which is a pretty reasonable thing to have happen. Now, the team were told that the project was axed in order to free up more development resources for Overwatch 2 and Diablo 4, which are set to be this year's BlizzCon headliners. Now, it's pretty clear that those projects are both running behind schedule. A source told me that Overwatch 2 at one point was planned for BlizzCon 2018, and that Diablo 4 was also planned. Now, my own sort of take on that is that I suspect Overwatch 2 was delayed a lot earlier on, and the Diablo 4 was a very late in the day cancellation for that BlizzCon. Regardless, though, it left them with Diablo Immortal as their headliner, which of course damaged their reputation greatly. And actually on that, we have a little bit more mobile news in a bit. Overall, this is going to have BlizzCon 2019 being one of the largest BlizzCons ever. Unless the next WoW expansion is announced at Gamescom, well, we'll probably have the next WoW expansion, and do note that World of Warcraft is probably the single largest game amongst BlizzCon attendees. A lot of guilds go there and meet up, so there'll be a WoW expansion, there'll be Overwatch 2, and there'll be Diablo 4. That is a really, really thick BlizzCon. As for the mobile games, well, Blizzard have also at the same time cancelled a mobile game. Again, with the reasoning being to shift resources over to Diablo 4 and Overwatch, according to Jason's report. And yes, through this, it does mean you can deduce that the mobile projects were taking up time from developers who could otherwise be working on PC and console games. That shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. Developers are a limited resource within a company, and with common tools like the Unity game engine, which is example what Hearthstone and probably their other mobile projects run off. But devs are a limited resource. They can work on a lot of different projects. It's pretty clear that devs working on a mobile project can also work in a PC and console project. I mean, come on. Now, we've got no idea what this mobile project that was cancelled is. We do know that Corey Stockton was heading up a Pokemon Go-inspired WoW project, and that there are a number of other mobile projects there across a few different genres. But unless Jason shares anything else, we're not really going to have any more information on that. Diablo Immortal is a slightly different kettle of fish, though. It's a co-development that is primarily, I believe, being developed in China, quite clearly for China, by NetEase, so it likely would not really be taking away development resources in the same way that an internally developed mobile project would. Now, with all that said, what was Ares actually like? Well, it was reportedly Battlefield in the Starcraft universe, according to one of Schreier's sources. Prototypes would let you play as a Terran Marine, with there being plans for playable Zerg as well. We don't really know that much past that, though. I do personally wonder if it was similar to Command & Conquer Renegade. Indeed, Renegade X is actually a remake of that game that released into beta in 2014, so that could have served as a bit of an inspiration. But anyway, it's really hard to know past that. So, 2 cancelled games. Is this indicative of Blizzard being bad? Is it blowing up? Is Blizzard dead? No, not really. Games get cancelled all the time. They get cancelled far more than you'd think. Every game that launches, that contributes to survivor bias. We only see the games that successfully release. For the most part, of course, we do hear about dead projects, but that means that it looks like the chances of success are higher than they actually are. And this is an effect that can really set an unhealthy expectation amongst both newbie developers and customers. In reality, something like this is a totally normal thing to happen. If development of Ares was going slow and the company felt like they really needed to progress Overwatch 2 and Diablo, then it's pretty reasonable to pull staff off the less positive-looking projects and onto the more positive-looking ones. After all, are people not quite critical of Blizzard for not supporting Overwatch that much and for neglecting the Diablo franchise? They are, so something like this helps those franchises and does make a good bit of sense. Indeed, this report even suggests that they're pulling developers off a mobile project and onto 2 PC and console projects. And I think that is exactly what most of the core audience would actually like to hear. I think that's a decision that most people would like to have made. Now, all of that said, I'm left feeling a little bit mixed as a near lifelong player of the StarCraft franchise. Of course, we lost StarCraft Ghost way back in the day. I mean, StarCraft 2 is pretty much my favorite Blizz game, and actually, from what I hear, it's in a really healthy state in terms of its profitability. But that said, RTSs, they're not really an in-genre these days, and StarCraft 2 does the job just fine. They did attempt to keep its story going with the Ghost mission pack, but that didn't really seem to perform that well because they haven't done any more of them, and they shifted the monetization over towards co-op commanders and cosmetic additions. I suppose it does have me worried that the StarCraft franchise will be left a little bit dead. Who knows? I mean, StarCraft 3 certainly could emerge in a decade. It's never really been a franchise that's had a super fast release schedule, that's for sure. Overall, though, I can understand why the initial knee-jerk response towards this would be, negative towards Blizzard. But really, I think it's just a peek into how the sausage is made. At the end of the day, they're in the business of making games. If one project is having slow progress and it's holding back 2 really solid bets, 2 projects that'll definitely do well, it makes a lot of sense to do what they did. Harsh as it may sound, the same logic also applies to Heroes of the Storm. As much as I disagree with how Blizzard dropped support for that game so quickly and how they strung along teams and kind of messed up its esports ecosystem, well, again, from what I hear, that game was in a pretty bad state in terms of its revenue, it was the lowest of the modern Blizzard titles, and it makes sense to pull devs away from that and onto other projects, ones that could be more promising. We'll still need to wait and see what this new era of Blizzard's going to look like. it's probably going to have them being a little bit more cutthroat in projects, maybe a renewed focus on just getting content out there. It really has been a rough few years for them. They dropped the second D3 expansion, even though Reaper of Souls basically saved that game. They cancelled the first version of Diablo 4. World of Warcraft's had a pretty troubled time recently. Overwatch has, stagnated massively, as has Hearthstone, but change does not come quick in the game industry. With 2 years being a fast development cycle, the fruits of whatever they're trying to plant right now, they're not going to bear for a while. Of course, I do want them to do well. I do wish them the best, but the one thing I will say is I'm a little bit worried about monetization and a little bit worried about that Blizzard quality and Blizzard polish kind of diminishing if they really, really feel like they have to get a lot of stuff out there pretty quickly. I mean, I look at the monetization of Hearthstone, which is a pretty expensive game to keep up to date with. I look at what Overwatch did for loot boxes, and then I look at Activision's Call of Duty Black Ops 4, which has a lot of issues. Really deep issues in terms of its monetization, and that does make me worried about the overall company, but assuming they don't fall into those many pitfalls, we do want more Blizzard content to come out, and it does seem like this is a pretty reasonable way for them to double down on Diablo 4 and Overwatch 2, which I think we can all agree are pretty solid bets and definitely are games that people do want to see. So let me know what you think about all that. Thank you very much for watching this video. Be sure to check out the other 2 reports on the channel today, and with that, I shall see you next time.